our taxes for the fire service are very, very reasonable. Less than it costs me to get my grass cut and my lawn watered in Worthington Country Club.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Conforti, we'll start with you on this next question. Are there any best practices of other fire districts that you would want to see implemented in this fire district?
Well, I think really that should be left up to the chief and his staff. If they see anything that they feel should be done in this district, they should bring it back here, bring it to the board, and we would consider it. But I don't believe that that is my position to go out and check other districts to see exactly, how they're performing and whether or not certain things that they do are better than others.
Thank you. Mr. McCourt?
Yes, thank you. Did my wife write that question?
I don't think so.
I probably won't have a chance to finish this answer, but let me say absolutely yes. And all we have to do is look around us. I'm not here. I don't know anything about fire. I don't know an awful lot about rescue or anything else. But I have a lot of common sense. And I have visited and I have seen other departments that are doing a job head and shoulders above us for a fraction of what we're spending. And when I tell them what our budgets are, they say, my God, if I had a budget like that, it's amazing what I could do. And it's just a matter of thinking outside the box and stopping with this thinking that we have to run all of our services out of a fire station and look at what needs to be done and how we would best approach that. And what I've challenged a lot of people to do is I said, sit down with a blank piece of paper and write out what the challenge is. Then just use your common sense to decide what's the best way to approach this. Then look at the way we're doing it. I rest my case.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald.
There are some new things out in the United States of America today that we should be looking at. And the chief knows it, and I know it, and we've talked about it. 3-man ambulance fire truck combination. Instead of sending out 2 pieces, we send out 1 piece. 3 people on that truck will handle and transport. Every person has to get to the hospital. And that little truck with some basic firefighting equipment can handle the very, very few fires we have in Bonita Springs. We need backup trucks, and that is another question. We can't just have little trucks. But there are new things. 3-man fire trucks are being used in other departments in this country. And I will check on that for you a little bit more. 3-man truck, by the way, can allow us to transport a person to the hospital at 0 charge instead of $1,000.
Thank you. And Mr. Murphy.
There was a comment earlier that every time there's an emergency medical situation, a fire truck shows up and then an ambulance shows up. Why is that? It's simple. 2-man ambulance cannot handle all the scenes necessary. 2 people can't attend to that victim or that person who's been injured or had a stroke or heart attack. They need a team of people to be able to do that. The fire truck usually gets there first because they can come from 5 different locations. If you're waiting for the ambulance in this town right now, there's 2.5 ambulances. Half meaning one's only there 12 hours of the day. That's inadequate for this city. We need to expand that. We need to take it to 3 or even 4 ambulances, and they need to be good equipment. The equipment that's out there right now being used by Lee County is inadequate. So I would say I would like to see a 3-man ambulance service in this town.
Thank you. Because of this particular question, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Identify one key issue on which you and your opponent disagree and the reason you believe your position on the issue is in the best interests of Bonita Springs.
There are many, and I'm not too sure where to even start. But the potential growth of this fire department with new stations, I made a motion that we should bring a consultant in and examine fire station location and need, response times, so that we could potentially relocate a station instead of just building extra stations. And over the 10 years that I've been here, we've had consultants in, and they've made that recommendation. Close down Mango Drive. We didn't close it down, we rebuilt it. Close down Station 1 on Old 41 and relocate it. We didn't do that either, we built this station. So even with the consultants, this board doesn't necessarily do what it should do. But you can't just say we're going to have more stations. You need professional help where they go and whether you can consolidate them.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy?
Yes, I believe we have had some expert help in locating these fire stations. They're there for a reason, they were put there for a reason, because of the population and response time. The very first time I came before this fire board, I was asked by Fred Forbes to come here and speak about station number 23. It was being proposed to close. It's right across the street from where I live at Pelican Landing. I want you to know, I came and testified about that. I had many different issues about that. I feel very strongly about that station being there. My house was hit by lightning, and when I showed up, the fire department was all over that building, putting it out and saving the building. I've had people who could not breathe across the street from Scotland come knocking on my door, please help me. I called 911 and got the fire station over. Who showed up? Station 23, truck engine 23. We've had another emergency at my house where someone fell over and hit their head and had a concussion. 23 was there within minutes. I don't believe that should be closed. I think these have been put there for a reason, and the future ones that are being built are going to be built for a good reason, or they won't be built.
Thank you. Mr. McCourt, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, great.
Is it up to me?
Yes.
Thank you. I believe, I'm not sure that I know my opponent's total position on a lot of things, except the history of what this board has done, and he's been here for 16 years, and that's his legacy. I think that we have to get beyond the thinking of station-based EMS, because the rest of the world is way ahead of us, and all you have to do is travel around this country and look and see and find out how they're getting there so quickly and how they're doing such a good job, because their ambulances are not parked in fire stations. Now, when you're talking about fire service, that's a different story. But remember, 80% of what we do is emergency medical. And I would say 99% of what the people out there expect from us is to have an ambulance out there within 5 minutes, 90% of the time, with a qualified paramedic. You need some help to carry them up and down the stairs? Dispatch 5 ambulances. That's easy. The police department does it all the time.
Thank you. And Mr. Conforti?
I believe my opponent in the past favored privatizing the ambulance service. I don't think that's a good idea. I believe that the best possible service is through your fire department, and having what Commissioner Fitzgerald suggested earlier was a 3-man ambulance. That's probably the best way to go. I don't think that Mr. McCourt is even in favor of having a paid department. In the past, he spoke of having volunteers. It's not really a feasible thing to do in this area.
Thank you. All right, I have some questions from our audience, and I'm going to ask them in no particular order. And let's start with Mr. Murphy. Would you support reducing capital surplus from 90 days to 30 days and securing a credit line to cover an emergency? Why or why not?
No, I would not support that. I think it's important that they have a 90-day reserve fund. You never know when a disaster is going to hit, and how are you going to pay these guys when they're trying to do the job if you don't have that reserve fund in place?
Thank you. Mr. Conforti?
I'm not in favor of reducing the 90 days to 30 days. I believe that the auditors that we have recommended that we rebuild to a 90-day surplus for our to carry from October to January, and I would not be in favor of changing that.
Mr. McCourt?
I believe it's ridiculous to be carrying heavy amounts of surplus in any department like this. There's at least a dozen or more good banks in this country that will give you all the money you need tomorrow based on the tax revenue that you have coming in. If you have an emergency, if you have a need, there's plenty of cash out there, believe me. You don't need it.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald.
I have to thank the taxpayer, resident of Bonita Springs, who brought this to our attention. It looks like we just didn't consider it over the years that we could go to a credit line. Makes sense to me. It's a good way to return some of this reserve money to the taxpayers. We have to have reserves. You have to have them in dollar bills, or you have to have them in credit. Having them in dollar bills costs you money. Having them in a credit line doesn't.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Conforti, we'll start with you. What is your opinion on our fire department changing to a municipal City of Bonita Springs fire department instead of the fire district system we currently have?
I've already stated that this special district is the best way to go. Having it under a city or under the county would be a mistake. It does not warrant that type of a situation where you would have a budget which would not just cover the fire department. It would be a general budget, and if you watch the way Lee County operates, they take stuff out of every budget and use it as their general fund and cut the services that you really need.
Thank you. Mr. McCourt?
Speaking with some experience in running city budgets and so forth, I think it would be a horrible mistake for the city to take us on. The evidence is all over the country. I come from Detroit, places like Compton, California, and a dozen other cities that have gone down because of the liabilities of running a fire department in the antiquated way that we do it. Now, once we get ourselves turned around and on the right track and doing the job the way it ought to be done, yes, it would make sense for the city to take it over.
Thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald?
I believe there should be one fire department in Southwest Lee. No, let me get that again. One fire department in Lee County. We have 17. We have 85 guys like us, fire commissioners, and no oversight over us. We are the ultimate last word. As bad as Mr. McCourt thinks the city would do, I think we're doing just as bad. So I would almost say, yes, let the city take us over.
And Mr. Murphy?
I think it's pretty good to be at 85 volunteers doing this type of job. That's not bad. And I completely agree with Commissioner Conforti. I know what happens when politics gets involved at that level when you go to the city. And you're right, they start robbing from your budget. And it disappears and it goes everywhere except where it's supposed to be, and that's in the medical protection in particular of this community.
Thank you. All right. I started with you, Mr. Conforti, on the last one, didn't I? Okay. Mr. McCourt. What is your position on the current amount of fire district impact fees and inspection fees, and what, if any, action will you take to change it?
I think there's an awful lot of ways that we can reduce that cost. One very specific way to do it, like a couple of other cities that I know of do it, is that they use their firefighters to do inspections. No, that's a no-brainer. Why do we need two people?
Okay. Mr. Fitzgerald?
I think impact fees are fair. Impact fees pay for growth. We're talking about putting new stations in, three new stations. Who's going to pay for them? You and I, taxpayer who live here, or the new people who are coming in causing us to build the stations? So I think impact fees are a fair way to do it. The numbers and how they come up with the number is beyond me, to be very honest with you. So I am pro impact fees.
Mr. Murphy? Sure. What is your position on the current amount of fire district impact fees and inspection fees, and what, if any, action will you take to change it?
One thing I'm noticing here is that we have taken our fire inspectors from 7 to 8 to 5, and now to 4. They're cutting back on inspectors right now, and I think they're almost overworked in that department. I don't know what the plans are for expansion of that, but it sticks out like a sore thumb to me, especially with the expansion of our growth here. I don't support cutting back any further in that area.
And Mr. Conforti?
I feel the inspection fees are reasonable here, but impact fees, I complained about impact fees several years ago, and those impact fees are really controlled by the county. We cannot set our own impact fees, so we are at their mercy, and I've always felt that they were not high enough.
All right, we touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to ask the specific question that the audience member asked, and we'll start with you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Do you believe in sending an engine as a support to a 911 rescue call? Why or why not?
I think you absolutely have to. When you don't have enough ambulances and the patient's going to sit in the street waiting and possibly die, and we have an engine sitting in a firehouse with talented, professional, licensed paramedics, you better send them.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
I completely agree. Half of the people that work at this fire department are paramedics. That's a very high level of skill, and we need to use them. There's no reason in the world for us not to send those fire trucks out because we don't have adequate coverage from Lee County.
Thank you, Mr. Conforti.
Until we get fire-based ambulance service, you must send the truck.
Thank you.
My favorite question. Why do we send a fire truck? Why do we send extra people? Is two separate questions. Why do we send the extra people on a truck carrying 6,000 pounds of water to an emergency call or an emergency medical call? There's a lot of other ways to get those people there, a lot less expensive. And the vehicles to get them there, you've got enough of them parked out in the parking lot here if you wanted to send them in individual SUVs. I gave the example, I don't remember if I did or not earlier, that we had a recent situation in our neighborhood where it involved a medical call and a police call. Now, before the fire engine got there, we had 4 police cars there. That tells us something about how they deploy their people versus how we deploy our people.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Murphy. What is your position on having the union president being a member of the administration?
I don't think that would be appropriate, but I don't believe that a battalion chief is part of the administration.
Thank you. Mr. Conforti?
That would be inappropriate, and the battalion chief is not a member of the administration. In fact, if you go back several years, they were captains. We changed the name to battalion chief because it was compatible with all the other departments here. But as you know, or as people don't know maybe, we do not have captains. We have battalion chiefs.
Thank you. Mr. McCourt?
I don't think they have any part being on that board.
Thank you. And Mr. Fitzgerald?
It doesn't bother me one bit. Union president, union delegate has very little say in this department. Who has all the say are the commissioners and the chief and the people who. The problem more so is who negotiates the contract. And right now it's the chief negotiating contract with the union. I don't care what rank they are, they can be in the union. They can be on the staff.
Thank you. Okay, this is our last question. Again, some things we've touched on, but allow you to be a little bit more specific in your answers. Mr. Conforti, we'll start with you. what do you consider to be the pros and cons of Bonita Springs Fire District taking over ambulance transport?
I don't see any negative implications of us taking that over. I believe it would be very advantageous to the people for us to take over medical transport. We can do it. We've got the personnel to do it. We don't need extra money to buy the ambulances and to perform those services. So I don't see any negatives in that.
Mr. McCourt?
I believe the emergency medical response should be done by one agency. Whichever one it is, I don't care. I'll support whoever steps up to the plate and presents us with a 21st century approach to getting the job done. It could very well be done by the fire department, and my position 4 years ago when I ran was that it should be the fire department. They were in a better position, I think, than the county at that time. I'm not so sure that's true today, but whichever organization does it, it should be one organization, not two organizations with this handoff thing, where the fire department comes out with their big red truck and does their thing, and then the ambulance arrives, and then the handoff, and they do their thing. It's just simply not efficient.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald.
I don't see any downside in doing it. But if you bring in one consolidated fire department, eliminate EMS completely, eliminate their management, their buildings, their trucks, and everything. Fire department can do the whole thing. I think it's a massive amount of money can be saved, and I think it might, and I think you'll see this department looking into the three-man truck in the near future. So I see no downside in taking EMS over. Matter of fact, I see great things happening for Bonita Springs and for Lee County.
Thank you. And Mr. Murphy?
It does make a difference which entity does this. It should be Bonita Springs Fire Control and Rescue District doing this. It shouldn't be the county. The county has already proven what they can do and what they don't do. This is the proper outfit, and we should push for that.
Thank you. Any more questions? We're good? All right, then let's start with Mr. McCourt, and you can each have 2 minutes to do a closing statement.
Okay. Again, I hope you don't misconstrue anything that I've said tonight or will say being critical of the fire department or the firefighters. I think the responsibility rests right up here at this table with the 5 men that generally sit here and make that policy. So that's where the mistakes have been made, and that's where we as citizens have to correct them. A lot of things have happened since the federal government issued their report called Burning America. If you recall, this is way back in the 70s, when they started to say that fire departments were doing such a good job that they were eventually going to work themselves out of the job. And that has happened. About 20 years ago, agencies, individual fire departments began to take a look at that report and say, hey, maybe there's some truth to this. Some of those departments stepped up to the plate and said that let's decide what's best for the citizens and let's build our organization accordingly. Others stepped up and circled their wagons and said let's keep the status quo. The agencies that have taken the side of the people to do the job properly are the ones that are thriving today. Some of some larger cities, 2 or 3 times the size of ours, with all of the same kind of demographics, are servicing their population with 11 full-time firefighters and 185 volunteers. And they buy their ambulance or their EMS service from a private nonprofit company. And they get their ambulance transport service for free. So those are the kind of things that are out there. Those are the kind of things that are happening today, and we got to get with it.
Thank you. Mr. Conforti.
I would just say that this department is being run efficiently and well by our staff. I believe that over the last few years with the new chief, we've done outstanding things. We are now even in cooperation with a private company that's operating a training school here. We've had our training center certified by the state. This is through the efforts of our chief and his staff. And we don't give enough credit to the staff here. They do an exceptional job. They go out of their way to perform their duties, and they do extra things here that no other place has that kind of a staff. I believe that I have given them the tools to do their job, and I believe I deserve to be reelected.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy.
I'm very proud of this fire department. I've worked with them for 4 years, and I have a great respect for all the people that I know that work here. I'm not coming here with a personal agenda, seeking this position as a candidate, or pretending that I know all the answers. But I've put in a lot of effort and a lot of boards around the country with private sector, with volunteerism in my community. I'm Vice President of Pelican Landing Community Association. I'm the liaison for the Pelican Landing Community Association to the Chamber of Commerce. I've served on many different posts. I was chairman of the tennis task force for their community. I helped rebuild our roads for 13 miles in our community last summer. I watched budgets, and I'll tell you what, from what I can see here, we should be very proud of what we've got here and like to build on that.
Thank you. And Mr. Fitzgerald.
I have a 2-minute speech, which now I don't want to make. There are problems in this department. You're most of it. You don't come to meetings, you don't watch us, you don't complain, you don't know what's going on. The other problem is we don't, as a board, we don't discuss properly, we don't investigate. When I first came here, the audience was in charge of the board meetings. It took me a couple of years to get this thing televised so we could get back on track a little bit. The local newspaper doesn't come here to watch what's going on. It's time for some changes. You'll have the opportunity to elect some new commissioners, and tonight you have met 4 candidates. 2 of them will serve at a critical time in this department as we face a major reorganization in the number and location of fire stations. The same 2 men will serve to effect the takeover of the emergency medical service from EMS. If it were ever necessary to use good judgment in your election, it is here and now. It is your choice. Ed Fitzgerald, who chooses to do the right thing for the Bonita Springs, or my opponent, who the hand-picked choice of the department, who chooses, in my eyes, to represent the fire union. This audience should demand better of us. We have the ability to do better, and we are not doing it.
Thank you. On behalf of the Bonita Springs Area Chamber of Commerce, I want to thank our candidates for participating and our audience. Thank you very much for coming. The next forum will be here next Tuesday night. That's October 14th, 5:30 to 7, and we will be listening to the candidates for the Lee County School Board District 4 and the Lee County Board of Commissioners District 4. Thank you very much for coming.